Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaurabhakta Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna.
Oh, you do that so nicely, Shashwin. So nice. Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Today in the Gopal Fun School, we did the Damodara Ashtakam and he recited it very well. We learned the.
Okay, I can imagine.
He is such an inspiration.
If you want anyone to adopt your son, I wouldn't mind.
Prabhuji, we are in the queue. We are in the queue to adopt Shashwin.
Oh, really? Okay, all right. Sorry. Okay. Where am I in the queue then?
At the bottom.
Am I bottom?
No, Prabhuji. We'll give you the top. If he
Okay.
gets your association, it'll be good for us. So yes, you adopt him and then we can learn from him.
Okay. Shashwin, where are you living? Shashwin, where are you living?
Unmute, Shashwin.
Eldoret, Kenya.
In Kenya. That's just up the road from us. We're in South Africa.
Yes. So you
Just up the road. It's like 5 minutes, 15 minutes like that, no?
Okay, so that's on the lighter note. Let's start. We have today as our mentor Shyamanand Krishna Das Prabhuji with us, all the way from South Africa, our neighboring country, so not very far away from us. Today we are on Bhagavad Gita as it is, chapter 5, text 5. And we'd like to pay our humble obeisances, Prabhuji, from everybody from all over the world. Like to pay our humble obeisances to you. Please accept that. And our Dandavat Pranams as well. Prabhuji, how do we start? Should we, it's text 5. So I now hand over to you. But whenever you need us to read anything, we can do it for you.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, so we just dive in, yeah, because Shashwin has already chanted the prayers so nicely. I feel like I have no position after hearing that. Okay, so we'll chant Sanskrit line by line, okay? We're doing text 5 from chapter 5. The chapter is entitled Karma Yoga, Action in Krishna Consciousness. And we're very early on in the chapter. We're going to do text 5. Yat sankai prapyate stanam
Yat Shankai
Tad yogai apigamyate Ekam sankam cha yogam cha Yat prashyati saprashyati Okay, word for word translation. Yat. What? Sankhya. By means of Sankhya philosophy. Prapyate. Is achieved. Sthanam. Place. Tat. That. Yogai. By devotional service. Api. Also. Gamyate. One can attain. Ekam. One. Sankham.
Sankyam,
Analytical study.
analytical study.
Cha
Cha
and
and
yogam.
yogam.
Action in devotion.
Action in devotion.
Cha
Cha
and
and
yaha.
yaha.
One who.
One who.
Pashyati.
Pashyati.
Sees.
Sees.
Saha.
Saha.
He.
He.
Pashyati.
Pashyati.
Actually sees.
Actually sees.
So Srila Prabhupada has rendered the following translation. One who knows that the position reached by means of analytical study can also be attained by devotional service, and who therefore sees analytical study and devotional service to be on the same level, sees things as they are. So you can repeat after me. One who knows
One who knows
that the position reached
that the position reached
by analytical study
by means of analytical study
can also be attained
can
Can
also be
attained
by devotional service.
by
devotional service.
And who therefore sees
And who therefore sees
analytical study
analytical study
and devotional service
and
devotional service
and devotional
to be on the same level.
to be on the same
level.
Sees things as they are.
Sees things as they are.
Okay, this is Srila Prabhupada's purport. I'm going to read. If you have your Bhagavad Gita in front of you, you can follow along with me. The real philosophical research is to find the ultimate goal of life. Since the ultimate goal of life is self-realization, there is no difference between the conclusions reached by the two processes. By Sankhya philosophical research, one comes to the conclusion that a living entity is not part and parcel of the material world, but the supreme spirit whole. Consequently, the spirit soul has nothing to do with the material world. His actions must be in some relation. When he acts in Krishna consciousness, he is actually in his constitutional position. In the first process, Sankhya, one has to become detached from matter. In the devotional yoga process, one is attaching himself to the work of Krishna consciousness. Factually, both processes are the same, although superficially one appears to involve detachment and the other process appears to involve attachment. Detachment from matter and attachment to Krishna are one and the same. One who can seize this sees things as they are. So to study this verse, we need to get context. What is going on here, actually? We need to understand what has gone before to understand, because here Krishna is answering another question of Arjuna, which is similar to one that he's already asked in the third chapter. In the third chapter, in the second chapter, Krishna talked a lot about Buddha Yoga, but at the same time, he condemned fruitive activity for sense gratification. So therefore, Arjuna asked, he said, if you think that intelligence is better than fruitive work, why do you want to engage me in this warfare? So similarly, this question at the beginning of this chapter is very similar because it's concerning the same basic question. Should one work or should one renounce work? That is the basic question. Krishna talked about it a lot in the second chapter, and therefore Arjuna is saying, well, if you think that intelligence is so wonderful, why do you want me to work like this? Why do you want me to engage in this warfare? So it's the same basic question. Should one work or should one renounce work? There's a very important thing in spiritual life because many people, especially from Indian backgrounds, they often think that actually spiritual life means to give up all material activity. But that is not what Krishna's actually recommending in Bhagavad Gita. So Arjuna has phrased the same question in a slightly different way here, because the previous discussion was about transcendental knowledge. discussion, Krishna is saying that all kinds of work culminate, sacrificial work, culminate in transcendental knowledge. In other words, being situated in knowledge, one should know how to work and how not to work. So Arjuna therefore is asking this question. In the first verse, Arjuna said, "Oh Krishna, first of all, you ask work." Because that's what Krishna asked, actually. He said, "I want you to give up the fruits of your work. Give up all kinds of work which are meant for sense gratification." That's what Arjuna is hearing. And then again, you recommend work with devotion. This is what Krishna was recommending in the 4th chapter. He was saying, we should perform akarmic activity, work in devotion, because it has no material reaction. So Arjuna has been confused by this question. First of all, you asked me to renounce work, and then again, you recommend work with devotion. So now kindly tell me definitely which of the two is more beneficial. So we're actually learning that these are not two different things. Actually, this is the actual subject, the subject matter which is in discussion here, is that these two things which have been written here as Sankhya and Karma Yoga, Sankhya Yoga, they're not actually different. They're actually two parts of the process to attain liberation from the material nature. Krishna has already talked about Sankhya previously. Actually, at the beginning of the discussion about renounced work, Krishna told Arjuna that some yogis actually have come to this conclusion of self-realization, this knowledge, through Sankhya, and others actually can get that realization through working without fruitive results. So there's also already some discussion of it. The Sankhya Yoga actually Sankhya literally means to count. It's a system of analysis. So in the Bhagavad Gita, it's only touched on in a few places. But in other places, especially Srimad Bhagavatam, there's a very detailed discussion about it. That is coming from Kapila Muni, who was born of the son of Kasyapa Muni and Devahuti. So there's a detailed discussion of there. But we can give summary here. Summary is also given by Krishna in Bhagavad Gita in 13th chapter. If we analyze the material nature, what do we find? As Krishna was saying at the beginning of Bhagavad Gita, we find that the body is temporary and the soul is eternal. And Krishna expressed that in so many ways, no? Going backward and forth in different ways. The body has no real existence. Of the non-manifest, there is no endurance. In other words, this body is not really live. It appears to be alive because of the presence of the supersoul. And of the eternal, there is no change. This is what Krishna was saying in that group of verses where Krishna is analyzing the nature of the body and the nature of the soul. So the conclusion is through Sankhya, through analyzing the nature of the body, we can come to the understanding actually that we're pure spirit soul. So here it's expressed in a slightly different way because Sankhya means to analyze the material nature. So if we analyze, what do we find? We find there are 24 elements actually, if we carefully analyze the material nature. We find first that there are the 5 gross elements. They're called gross because they're very easily accessible to us. We can see them, we can touch them. In some cases, we can hear, we can feel their influence, we can smell them. We can actually get access to those 5 gross elements very easily. They are air, water, air, fire, ether. They are the 5 gross elements. Many of the things around us we can touch, they're made up of these 5 gross elements. Then we find that there are the 5 knowledge acquiring senses. No? They are the eyes, the nose, the tongue, the ears, and the skin. They acquire knowledge from the outside world. This is how we know what's going on in the outside world, because through these 5 senses, we can actually experience for ourselves. They're called the knowledge acquiring senses. Then there are the working senses, because when we get information from the outside environment, it causes us to act. But in order to act, we need these senses of action. They are the hands, the legs, the voice, the anus, and the genitals. These are the 5 senses of action, how we actually interact. When we get stimulus, we act in that way. So far, we've got the 5 gross elements, the 5 working senses, and the 5 knowledge acquiring senses. That's 15. Then there are the 3 subtle elements. We have 2 bodies. One is made of gross elements, and one, the subtle body or the astral body, is made of mind, intelligence, and false ego. So far we have 18. Then we have something called the pradhan, which is the unmanifest state of the modes of material nature. So what do we got now? We got 19, no? So then there are the 5 sense objects, because the senses must be able to connect with something. So the eyes see form, the ears hear sound, no? The tongue relates to taste. So these are the 5 objects of the senses, no? The ears relate to sound. So we've now analyzed the whole material nature, and we found there are 24 elements. But within those 24 elements, we haven't found the spirit soul anywhere. So you see, Prabhupada is saying in the fifth verse purport that actually we don't find the spirit soul. So it must be something that's in relationship with Krishna. It must be something in relationship with the spiritual world. So this is one way of analyzing through Sankhya, actually what the situation is. And Krishna has dealt with this previously. It can also be understood because when we come to that level of not finding the spirit soul in the material nature, then we have to look outside. So we come to the spiritual nature. So this is the Sankhya Yoga. So in order to pursue that understanding, then one has to renounce activity on this material plane. That is the Sankhya Yoga. So the common way of understanding that is what's called karma sannyas, is to give up activity. But the problem with giving up activity is that it's difficult to do that. But if we can do that, if we can give up material activity, we will come in contact with the spiritual nature. By not interacting on the material plane, we come in contact with the spiritual nature and can achieve liberation. But it's also true that this other system, which Krishna is discussing, the karma yoga, one can also attain liberation. But that's done in a different way. It's done by working without fruitive results, to do our duty and not worry too much about the results that come from that duty. Krishna was explaining that in 2nd chapter in terms of that one has the right to perform one's duty, but we are not the cause of the results of our activity. We shouldn't consider ourselves actually the cause of the results of our activity, and we should never be attached to not doing our duty. So this is the other way of approaching self-realization. Now, the thing is, in the beginning, actually, when we start out in self-realization, we have to work. Because the thing is, the senses need engagement. And if we're not self-controlled, if our hearts are not pure, we won't be able to actually give up material activity. So in the beginning, actually, one has to work in a dutiful way without considering the results so much. And in this way, our heart becomes purified. And then when we become considerably purified, then what happens is that we develop a natural desire to look inward, to meditate actually on the super soul. And in this way, we can come to liberation. So if we look at the results achieved by these 2 paths, we can understand they come to the same point. They come to liberation from the material nature. But in these verses, Krishna is pointing out that actually of these 2 paths, they both achieve the same result. And that's what Krishna is saying here in this 5th verse. And actually it's a repeat of the 4th verse, put in a slightly different way. One who knows the position reached by analytical study. Prabhupada has actually translated that way, but it's Sankhya Yoga in the Sanskrit. But that actually means analytical study, and that's why Prabhupada has translated in that way. Can also be attained by devotional service. That is Karma Yoga. Karma Yoga becomes devotional service if we execute it properly. We're learning that this is the yoga ladder, actually. We begin with karma because karma is what we're used to doing. And if we execute our activities in a dutiful mood with detachment from the results, it will bring us to devotional service. So therefore, one who knows the position reached by means of analytical study can also be attained devotional service, and therefore sees analytical study and devotional service to be on the same level, sees things as they are. So in other words, we have to understand that these are 2 processes actually which are linked. They're not like a tree and a mountain. They're not separate from one another. They're actually closely linked. And in the beginning, actually one may perform one process, but it leads to the other. So in this way, Krishna is pointing out that they're not different. They both lead the same result. And therefore they are on the same level. And if we understand the philosophy that Krishna is explaining properly, we can understand that, yes, they lead to the same point, but there is a difference. And that is what Krishna is pointing out, actually. But just to kind of tie up what I was saying, if we read the translation to the last verse, we'll see that Krishna is saying the same thing. Only the ignorant speak of devotional service, karma yoga, Karma yoga is the term which Krishna uses, but if it's executed properly, it leads to devotional service as being different from analytical study of the material world, Sankhya. Those who are actually learned say that he applies himself well to one of these paths, achieve the results of both. So the same principle is being explained in this 5th verse. And Krishna is doing that for emphasis, because we have to understand what to do. There are so many processes of Vedic purification out there. And we need to understand them, actually, to some extent, in order that we can come to the platform of devotional service and use the things from those different Vedic paths which are applicable in devotional service. So we need a knowledge of these various Vedic processes to understand devotional service properly. So here Krishna is dealing with that. Arjuna is saying, should I renounce work or should I work in devotion? First of all, you renounce work. And Arjuna is thinking, when Krishna is saying that, he's thinking, but you were saying we shouldn't work for sense gratification. So we have to give up work, right? And at the same time, Krishna is saying, no, work in devotion. That's 4th chapter. But of the 3 processes, karmic activity, vikarmic activity, and akarmic activity, Krishna was recommending we should actually perform akarmic activity. And through the process of acquiring transcendental knowledge, we can differentiate which is karma, which is vikarma, which is akarma. So therefore, we can learn to act in devotional service. So therefore, Arjuna is confused. He's saying, first of all, you're saying we should give up work, things which are meant for sense gratification. And now you're saying we should work in devotion. So it's a bit confusing, because actually Arjuna, again, is asking this question for us. Because many people think that to be spiritual, you have to give up the material. But Krishna doesn't recommend that, actually. That path is very difficult. The path of devotional service actually is much easier than the path of giving up activity. And we need to understand why that's the case, actually. But this process, because Krishna is explaining that, if we go a little further back, where is it? 2nd verse. If we go a little, because in order to understand this 5th verse properly, we need the context of the previous verses. So when Krishna is answering, he's saying the renunciation of work and work in devotion are both good for liberation. That's what Krishna went on to explain in these verses, that they both lead to the same result. But, Krishna says, of the 2, work in devotion and service is better than renunciation of work. They both lead to the same result, but one path is much easier than the other. That is what Krishna is pointing out. But at the same time, we have to recognize that these 2 paths lead to the same result. And actually, if one executes the first one, it leads to the second. But if one understands devotional service, one can skip. One can work in devotion directly from the platform of work. But this other route, to give up work and to turn inside and meditate, is actually very difficult. So what Krishna is pointing out here by saying that work in devotion actually is better, there are reasons for that. First of all, it's safer. Then it's easier and it's more practical. So we should understand why we're saying this. It's more practical. We'll go backwards, actually. It's more practical. Why? Because we are used to working. We are not used to doing nothing, actually, to give up work. It's more practical for us to work and purify ourselves through work. And actually, when we come to devotional service, not only to work to purify ourselves through our work, through doing our duty, but actually to offer it to Krishna. And then it becomes a source of great purification, and we can go straight. Prabhupada actually says that in some places, that this yoga ladder, we're discussing that now in chapters 1 to 6. It is like going up the staircase in a building. You can go up the staircase like this, or you can get in at the ground floor and you can get into the lift and you can press the button. And the lift will take you straight to the top floor. So devotional service is like that. We go straight to the goal, actually. We don't have to go up all these steps. Imagine the Empire State Building or a tall building that you know. Imagine climbing all the steps to go to the top of the building and getting into the lift. What would any sane person do? Any sane person actually would get into the lift and push the button. So that is devotional service. And that is why at the end of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says you give up all these Vedic processes. Just give it up and surrender to me and become my devotee. And then it becomes very easy. So this is why it's more practical for us, because we are used to acting. So therefore, let us continue to act, but let us use that action as a way of purifying ourselves. So it's much easier. To give up working, you can try. Actually, I used to, when I was a Gurukul teacher in Mayapur, we used to do this with the boys, actually. We used to say, okay, what we're going to do now, we're going to think of nothing. And I'd actually teach them the process of pranayama, you know, to focus on their breath. And then we would see how long it was before our minds wandered and went somewhere else, because we're used to being active. And especially in this age of Kali, to be still and not do anything is extremely difficult. The sages of Naimisharanya, they were telling Sutta Goswami, actually, that the personalities in this age, they are characterized by 6 things. It's the age of quarrel. So he said they're prone to quarrel, they're lazy, they're misguided, they're unlucky, they're short-lived. And he said, above all, their minds are always disturbed. That is the huge challenge that we have in this age. Our minds are always disturbed. So we can't practice this process of giving up and not working, just meditating. You can practice it, but you won't get any result from it because our minds are not stable. We can't practice that in this age. But it's a Vedic process. It's actually the process which is there in the Satya Yuga, when people had 100,000 years and they could meditate for 40 or 50,000 years. It wasn't a big problem because everyone was very pure and the minds are very stable. So this is why Krishna is saying, first of all, it's more practical for us because we have to work. Even Arjuna was told that. Krishna told Arjuna, your qualification, your adhikari is to work. And Arjuna's work was what? Killing family members on the battlefield. That was Arjuna's practicality, you know. So it's more practical. Actually, Krishna told him at the end of Bhagavad Gita, even if you don't follow my instructions, you will fight because it's your nature. So you may as well do it under my direction and attain victory, you know, and be remembered as the great warrior on the battlefield. So this is what Krishna is advising. We should work. We shouldn't give up work. And this comes again and again and again in Bhagavad Gita. You know, that we should stay in our position and we should work and we should adopt the principles of Krishna consciousness. That is practical. That is something that anyone can do. Like I was just reading the other day, actually, that one reporter was asking Srila Prabhupada that does everyone have to join the temple? You know, can't you stay at home? And Prabhupada told him, yes, you can stay at home and you can practice Krishna consciousness at home. It's very practical for everyone in this age. So therefore, this process of working in devotion is very practical. It's easier. It's much easier. You can try it, you know, to actually sit down in a place and meditate. Try and meditate for a couple of hours. You can see yourself actually how difficult it is. It's not easy for us because we are used to doing things. Actually, in 3rd chapter, Krishna was saying that is one of the reasons why we have to work, because we're forced by the modes of material nature. We can't sit. Krishna even says we can't do nothing. We can't do something for, you know, we can't do nothing even for the time it takes to blink an eye. In the 5th verse of 3rd chapter, Krishna is saying that for Shyamanand. He said, you can't even do nothing for that length of time, the time it takes to blink your eye. So therefore, we have to do something. Senses require engagement. To artificially restrain the senses is a very, very difficult thing. Not possible for anyone in this age, actually, but it is a valid Vedic process. And to recognize that it will give the result is actually knowledge. So that's what Krishna is saying here in this 5th verse. The one who sees that these 2 paths lead to the same destination sees things as they are. And actually, it's not really even 2 paths. It's actually 2 segments of the same path. But when Krishna says that beginning of 6th chapter, actually, that one who is neophyte in the yoga process, his methodology is to work, because by working in a spirit of renunciation, we purify the heart. And when the heart is purified, then automatically a desire to turn inward and meditate comes. So they're literally 2 segments of the same path. One works in the beginning, and then when one is mature in yoga practice, then one can meditate. So this is what Krishna has explained. They lead to the same goal. So therefore, we should understand that. They're on the same level. They actually have achieved the same result. But because it is easier, it is more practical, and it's safer. This is the 3rd thing. It's safer. And Prabhupada actually gives the example in his purports. actually, of Vishwamitra Muni, who was the Kula Guru of Maharaj Dasharath. He was the family guru. So actually what he endeavored to do was to practice the process of Ashtanga Yoga, which actually has 8 limbs or 8 stages. Yama and niyama are internal and external purity by following rules and regulations. Then asana, one has to learn to sit. Then pranayama, one has to learn to control the breath. Then pratyahara, one has to withdraw the mind from sense objects. So he was gradually going through these steps. And he was in the stage of pratyahara, the business of withdrawing the mind from the senses and the sense objects like that. And at that time, Indra, who became a bit worried, seeing this personality doing so well in his meditation, felt that his post of Indra was actually in jeopardy. And therefore he sent a dancing girl to break his meditation. And when she appeared on the earth planet and began to dance in front of him, actually, at that time he'd been meditating for 64,000 years. And his meditation was broken. He hadn't actually perfected pratyahara, withdrawing the senses from their objects, and his meditation broke. So this is after 64,000 years. So from this we can understand how difficult it is and how safe it is to perform devotional service. Actually, we can even do the things we like to do for Krishna, and it becomes devotional service, provided it doesn't go against the ethos of devotional service and breaking the principles. We can do what we like to do for Krishna. It comes very naturally. It's very safe. Imagine fighting with your mind. Actually, even during japa, we fight with our minds. Sometimes our mind wants to go and do this or think about that, and we have to bring that mind back. And then we're doing japa when we're doing that. We're actually engaging the mind and hearing about Krishna's holy name. So can you imagine just focusing on the breath and trying to control your mind? So it's much, much safer. Because Krishna also points out in 2nd chapter that the mind, if it focuses on one of the senses, you can be swept away like a boat on water. He gives that analogy, actually. So that's what happened to Vishwamitra Muni. His sense of hearing, he was a man of intelligence endeavoring to control the senses, and this one sense, the hearing sense, actually broke his meditation and took him away from that situation. So these are the 3 things to consider here. This is why Krishna is saying that it is good. These 2 processes are good. They're on the same level. They both come to the stage of liberation if they're practiced properly. But one is better than the other because it is safer, it is easier to perform, and it's more practical. So therefore, this is what Krishna is recommending. Actually, Krishna doesn't really recommend Jnana Yoga or Sankhya Yoga anywhere in Bhagavad Gita. He mentions it actually mostly to counter Arjuna's argument that I don't want to fight because people will be killed. Krishna uses Sankhya to defeat that argument of Arjuna. You know, that actually if we really analyze, we find that actually the soul is eternal and the body is temporary, so nobody's really killed. So why are you lamenting like that? He even tells him at the beginning of that discussion, he says, one that wise laments neither for the living nor the dead. So this is how Sankhya can actually release us. But the thing is, we hear this kind of analysis and intellectually we kind of understand it. Yes, I'm not the body. But then as soon as the discussion is over, we go back to acting like with the body. So the Sankhya is okay up to a point. We just get an intellectual understanding, but it doesn't make us change our position, what we do on a day-to-day basis. After hearing that, we don't go to the forest and meditate. And even if we try, we wouldn't be able to actually, because no one can focus their mind these days in that way. So therefore, Krishna is saying, it's better to stay in your position, whatever that is. And that's what we preach these days. Whoever you are, whatever you are, just stay in your position and take Krishna into your life. And principally that means to chant Krishna's holy name. Take this process of devotional service into your life and practice according to your capacity. But because we're practicing the devotional process, which is much easier and gives results very quickly, Krishna even says that later on as well, that very quickly, if we practice this process, we can come to that platform of realization of the Supreme, very quickly actually, for one who practices properly. So this is what Krishna is pointing out here. It's fair enough, it is a Vedic process, but we have to consider what is going on in that process. Is it practical? Is it safe? Will I be able to perform it? So the Jnana Yoga, the Sankhya Yoga, we can't do that actually. It's a very dangerous process. One can get deviated very easily. One can get himself into trouble. One can wind up doing things which you never thought he'd do. But this process of devotional service is very easy because we're used to acting. So simply let us do what we like to do, but do it for Krishna. So this is the sum and substance of what Krishna is actually saying here up to this 5th verse, which is one who knows that the position reached by means of analytical study. If we analyze the nature of the body and the soul, actually, and we imbibe that understanding, we can come to the platform of liberation. I'm not this body. I'm pure spirit soul. And my business actually is to meditate on the super soul. We can come to that understanding, but that is a very difficult process to do that. You have to have qualification. Your heart has to be pure. You have to work to produce that purification. Or we can engage in the process of devotional service, which is the aim of Bhagavad Gita. Krishna wants us to surrender to him. What does that surrender mean? It means what is given in 934 and again in 1865. Always engage your mind in thinking of me, become my devotee, offer your obeisances to me, and worship me. Being fully absorbed in me, surely you will come to me. So Krishna is pointing out, actually, these Vedic processes may be there, but actually we should simply engage in devotional service because that's the best. According to our capacity. We've discussed this previously, that we need to be realistic. It's not that everyone can just suddenly go and join the temple. And what would happen to society if that happened as well? So 12th chapter, actually, Krishna gives different levels of entry into devotional service, different stages. So that begins, Krishna is saying, just engage your mind and intelligence in me and be fixed in me, and that way you'll always live with me. But we're not ready for that, though, most of us, because we're used to acting on the material platform. So for most of us, we can't really do that, just become completely absorbed in Krishna. That's our goal, and through the devotional practices, we can work towards it. But in the beginning, most of us can't do that. So Krishna says, fine. He tells Arjuna, if you can't do that, then engage in the regulative principles of bhakti, what we call sadhana bhakti. Practice being a devotee, and gradually you'll develop a desire to attain me. Krishna says, you'll come to me. But then how many people can actually take up the vows? 4 active principles, 16 rounds a day, engage favorably with devotees, perform devotional service, read Srila Prabhupada's books. Many people are not ready for that kind of regulation in their lives. So Krishna says, fine, then you work for me. Do something for me. Go to the temple and chop sabjis, or help the devotees distribute books, or go out on Food for Life and distribute prasadam. Do something which is of a devotional nature, which is not working for you, which is working for me. And many people, even if you ask them to do that, they say, no, I have no time. I can't do that. No. So then Krishna says, fine, if you can't do that, then at least try and situate yourself on the right path by working in a spirit of renunciation. Just understand the nature of this material world and try to be detached from the results of your activity. And then gradually it will bring you to the platform where you want to work for me, where you want to practice the principles of devotional service. And even Krishna is so merciful, he said, fine, if you can't do that, if you can't give up the attachment to the results of your work, because many people can't, then he says you simply cultivate knowledge. So this is the lowest rung. At least come to the Bhagavad Gita class and learn about spiritual processes and what we're supposed to do like that. So devotional service is spread on a very wide platform, and one can get entrance into it in many different ways. So for us, we're a little serious, So it means we're at least trying to practice the regulative principles of bhakti, like that, sadhana bhakti. But in our preaching activities, actually, we may need to understand these other levels so that we can engage people. Because Krishna says that in 3rd chapter. He said, if somebody is busy doing their material activities and they're attached to that, he said, don't disturb them. He said, rather you engage them in things which will gradually develop their Krishna consciousness. That's called the Gyata Sukriti. We can engage people in that way. Little by little, bring them to the process. Give them taste, give them something to do that they don't realize is devotional service. And this way they get purified. So this is the sum and substance of what Krishna is saying. This process, actually working in a spirit of renunciation, will lead to devotion. It is safe, it is easy to perform, and it's more practical for us because of who we are and what we are. So Krishna wants us to act in this kind of way. You know? This process is much easier. So it starts with renunciation of the results of our activities. That's how it begins. This is one of the processes I mentioned. Krishna is discussing that in the 12th chapter. But then we should advance beyond that. You know, we should come to the platform of realizing that, you know, I can work, I can do the things I want to do, but I can offer it to Krishna as devotional service. So you like to sing? Okay, come and learn to sing for Krishna. You like to cook? We need so many cooks. We need Sunday feasts cooked all over the world. You know, we're an expert speaker. Let's learn to speak about Krishna to others. So whatever we're good at, we should engage that in Krishna's service, actually. In that way, we'll make very rapid advancement. So Krishna here is pointing out the easiness of the process of devotional service. So we should be attracted by that, actually. Even though we know that these other processes lead to the same result, we shouldn't walk up the stairs. It's called the yoga ladder. You know, it begins at the platform of performing activities because we want to get our sense gratification, karma kanda, and gradually, step by step, through karma yoga, through dhyana yoga, we come to the platform of realizing the supersoul is a person we want to surrender. We can go through all that, but Krishna doesn't recommend that. He says, no, you just forget about all this dharma, all these processes I mentioned. You just surrender to me. But it's useful to us to understand these Vedic processes in their proper context so that we have a full picture, and our surrender to Krishna is based on knowledge and not based on sentiment. So we have about 15 minutes left or a little more. I'd like to open the floor for discussion and realization and comment. Is there anything? Oh, there's something on the chat. Let me look.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, I wrote that before you explained how Krishna consciousness is safer.
Okay. Why is devotional service safer? Yeah, I hope everyone gets that. Devotional service is very safe for a variety of reasons. Because we are doing what comes natural and we're doing it for Krishna. We can also get Krishna support through the devotees. We can get so much help. It's so easy like that. But if you want to perform this other process of sitting in the forest somewhere and meditating, you're on your own. There's no support there. There's no mercy, there's no support. You've got to pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. And Prabhupada has actually made it so easy for us to perform devotional service. He's made it so easy. He said that I have made this ISKCON simply so that devotees can get together and get association of each other and perform their devotional service so easily. So this is why devotional service is safer. There's nothing on, there are no questions on the chat, but I'm wondering if anybody would like to share realization or ask questions or seek clarification or make observations, because I'm very much a believer that this is a two-way street. When we get together actually and we discuss, we should make it a two-way street. Not that I'm just the teacher and you're the students, because I often find that when we're together actually sometimes the students can become the teachers. They have realizations, they have understanding on the basis of discussion. If they share, then everyone benefits from that. When I can talk till the cows come home, you can ask my wife if you don't believe me. But I would like to hear from you. When we have this discussion about work, what does it mean to you? This discussion about devotional service, how is that working for you? Because we should think in terms of how we can advance. We shouldn't just be comfortable. That can be one problem when we're practicing the path of devotional service. We get a little comfortable. You know, we get to a point where we're chanting a certain number of rounds, and we go to the temple, we do some service, and it becomes comfortable. And we stop pushing ourselves. You know, we start to think, well, you know, I'm doing all right. You know, I don't really have to work so hard. We should never forget actually that Krishna wants us to become pure devotees, and to do that we have to actually make some endeavor. So we shouldn't become comfortable. Actually, we should always be thinking, how can I do a little bit more? Because in the practicing stage, we are sadhana bhaktis. We're practicing the stage of devotional service. It's not that when we go to the spiritual world, that all stops. But rather, when we go to the spiritual world, there's more. Actually, service becomes 24/7, 365. Of course, there's no days of the week there. But we're practicing now that we can immerse ourselves completely in Krishna. That is why it's explained that devotional service must be unmotivated and uninterrupted in order satisfy the self. So I think that's one realization I've been getting recently in my own practice, my own attempts at devotional service. I think that sometimes we, when we come into contact with this process, we do some things and we think, I'm really doing great, I'm really doing good. And as we learn a little bit more, we realize, oh, actually, I'm in surrendering this much, but I need to surrender this much. And then we try harder and we surrender a bit more. And then when we come to that stage, you realize, oh, actually, this isn't enough surrender either. Actually, I'm supposed to do a bit more. And sometimes it becomes a bit bewildering. We think we're really trying hard and we're doing our best. And then a devotee says something to us, or Prabhupada talks to us from his books, and we realize, oh, I'm actually not as advanced as I thought I was. I'm surrendering this much, but I actually need to surrender this much. And this is how it goes on. So we mustn't become complacent, actually. You mustn't think that, okay, now I've arrived, I'm doing my however many rounds it is, and I come to the temple, I'm reading Prabhupada's books, I'm doing some devotional service, and I associate with the devotees, and everything's tickety-boo. I'm going to go back to Godhead at the end of this lifetime. Actually, we have to make an endeavor to increase, because in the end, we need to become completely immersed, uninterrupted and unmotivated in order to satisfy the self. That is what's required of us, actually. Anyway, so I wonder, I can talk too much. I wonder if anyone has comment or question. How do we identify that we have not surrendered? I can help you with that one. How can we identify? You see, you've got to ask yourself, this is the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. So you can ask yourself, you can look in your heart and you can ask yourself, how much do I think of Krishna during the day? How much is my consciousness absorbed in Lord Krishna, in my daily activities? You can ask yourself that. I don't need to know the answer, but it's a rhetorical question in one sense. But you need to ask yourself, how much am I absorbed in Krishna? Because the thing is, spiritual world means total absorption in Krishna, nothing less. It means total. So we can measure ourselves like that. We can ask ourselves, how much is my consciousness absorbed in Lord Krishna? How much do I love Lord Krishna? You can ask yourself those kinds of things. You can ask yourself as well, if I'm doing an activity, what is this for? Is this activity I'm doing for Krishna, or is it for me? Because those are the only two choices we have, actually. We either perform activities for ourselves in some way, or perform activities for Krishna's pleasure. There's no third choice. That's all there is. So you can ask yourself, when in my daily routine and the things I'm doing, how much of what I'm doing is for Krishna, and how much is it for myself? Actually, surrender is a deep subject matter. I touched on this. I think I touched on this last time. You see, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur has analyzed this subject matter in the greatest detail. He has written 50 songs on this subject. It's called Sharanagati. Some of those songs, actually, we sing them regularly. They're in the Vaishnava songbook, some of the songs from his Sharanagati. Sharanagati is the process of surrender. So there are different things, different angas. There are 6 angas or limbs of that process. So the first one that he analyzes is Daina, which is humility. So this is a way we can actually analyze ourselves. How humble are we, actually? How ready are we to hear from other devotees about how we can become a better devotee? How ready am I to hear about what I need to do as a devotee, what faults I need to work on, how I need to become more open, not just to my spiritual master, but to all the devotees, actually, to be instructed and to learn to be a better devotee. That's one way we can ask. Then also in this process, in these 6 angas, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur has identified actually 2 which are very easy to measure ourselves and see how we're doing. The first is to accept things which are favorable for the execution of devotional service. And the second is to reject things which are unfavorable for the process of devotional service. So, and this is one of the biggest stumbling blocks for devotees, that they often know that this activity is not conducive to performance of pure devotional service, and therefore I shouldn't do it. They kind of intellectually understand that, but they don't give up the activity. They still do it anyway. Or even looking at it the other way, the devotees sometimes know very well, what are the things they should do which are conducive to the practice of devotional service, and they know intellectually, but they don't do them. So this is actually one of the biggest stumbling blocks in surrender for devotees, that actually they know very well, I should accept these things because they're favorable to the execution of devotional service, and I should reject these other things. I shouldn't do those because they're unfavorable. And Rupa Goswami has taught us about those things, collecting more funds than required or eating more than is required, endeavoring for mundane things which are difficult to achieve, talking about nonsensical things. Rupa Goswami has gone to so much in depth to help us identify. And then on the positive side, utsahan, to be very enthusiastic. Actually, Prabhupada once said, without enthusiasm, everything is finished. Prabhupada once said that. So enthusiasm is very important, actually. Then also to have patience, determination, to follow in the footsteps of the previous acharyas, not to perform devotional service activities simply for the sake of doing them, or rejecting the rules and regulations. We have to know these things, rejecting the rules and regulations and acting whimsically. Rupa Goswami has gone to a great trouble to write these things down so that we can become aware of what we need to do as devotees to advance. So this is another way you can read those verses in Upadeshamrita, the Nectar of Instruction, and you can ask yourself, how am I doing? How much am I following this path? So we need checks and balances. By reading, by hearing from other devotees, we can get a sense of where we are, how much we've surrendered to Krishna, and how much we need to do. And you can always add to it, Even the greatest amongst us can always add to our surrender. There are other things like, for instance, the self-surrender is number 2 in that. Number 1 is dina, humility. Number 2 is atmanivedan, self-surrender. How much am I surrendered to Krishna? And, in the beginning, that's not so much we can measure it to, how much am I surrendering to Krishna, but we can measure it by how we're surrendering to the devotees. How much am I, surrendering to the will of those who are my gurus? How much am I, trying to serve them and help them in their service? And in the beginning, it just starts with our Diksha Guru, our spiritual master. But then we should learn to actually surrender to those who are helping us in our spiritual life. Anyone who's helping us in our spiritual life should learn to surrender to those persons. This is another way we can measure how much is my self-surrender going on. Then Goptrikte Varam, how much am I feeling that Krishna is my only protector? How much am I feeling that? Or am I thinking, no, that family members are my protectors and my boss is my protector? There are different ways of measuring it. So one can study that. If you've got the Veda base, you can download the Veda base for free these days, actually. If anyone wants the link, I can send it to them. You can actually download the Veda base free, and you can look at Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur's songs under Sharanagati. He's done it so beautifully because he's expressed it in poetry. And you can sing those songs, actually. You can sing those, and you can learn about the process of surrender. So these are some things on measuring our level of surrender. No? Where are we at? And then when we understand where we're at, it's some impetus to move forward. Oh, I thought I was a big surrendered devotee, and now I've analyzed it, I'm actually this much surrendered. And the question should be, okay, how can I be that much surrendered? What can I do to surrender a little bit more? You should always be thinking like that. Okay, there are some other things here which have come up.
Can I, Shyamananda Prabhu?
Yeah.
Can I interrupt? Because if they call off or if I call off both, I'd really like to acknowledge Paresh Shukla, who has come to us all the way from Kampala, Uganda, and Ekanath, who had invited him. So we would like to acknowledge Paresh Shukla, and we hope he will be with us on our Zoom program. Ekanath tries here and there. He's a lawyer. And Stephanie has a question. I think it should be directed to you more than me. She's joined us from the US. And there's a Hansa. I keep seeing her. If she's a Hansa who's, what I forget the name, whose son is in the UK. There's somebody called Prasanna Soman. I don't know who that is. I would love to know. And of course, we would like to acknowledge Priya Govinda, who's very busy, but he's with us. So anyways, sorry for the interruption, but you can carry on. There's an RK also.
Actually, just to give you an answer to the question, so Hansa
No, it's not.
is from
It's your
Eldoret.
prerogative because you are the.
She was originally from Eldoret, but she's in the UK since the last 25 years.
Oh,
So Hansa Bhabi is now in the UK, and even her sons are in the UK, but they are ex-Eldoretians. And
oh,
Prasanna Somam is another person that has just joined our group. So
yeah, I saw the name for the first time from the UK.
no, from I don't know where she is right now, but she used to attend our Gita classes when my mother-in-law was there. So
Oh.
maybe she's in Eldoret or maybe in India.
Oh, okay. Hi. And who's this RK?
I don't know RK, but welcome to the group, everybody. And if you want us to include you in our group on WhatsApp, please give us your telephone numbers and we can have you in the group as well. Hare
And
Krishna.
also Bhavna Swani, she says she's coming, but I don't know under what name she comes. But before we not wind off, you carry on with the question, I'll have to call off. But Shyamananda Prabhu, you have to give us the next date, not Sunday in between. Except for Thursday, we are booked.
Wednesday we are booked as well. Umapati Prabhuji takes Wednesdays, unless he's not coming.
Is he coming on Wednesday? I thought he said he was not going to.
He hasn't come since the last 5-6 Wednesdays.
Yes.
Prabhuji will tell us probably. Path Prabhuji, when is Umapati Prabhuji off till?
No, Prabhuji have Bhagavad Katha is going on, so that maybe he is not able to come this week.
Okay.
We will contact after Diwali. It means 15, maybe next week.
Okay, Prabhuji, any day except Thursday because we are booked on Thursday.
Yes, no problem. Thursday is okay.
Any day besides Thursday.
Oh, besides Thursday, no problem.
Shyamanand, Krishna Prabhuji, so when would you have time for us again? Sorry, we are putting you in the spot.
But Sunday is booked, right? No out on Sunday, right? Shyamananda Prabhuji?
Prabhuji, you are muted. Prabhuji, you are muted. Prabhuji,
So-
we can't hear you. You are muted.
I'm going to have to think about that because I already have 3 other Zoom groups during the week and I have meetings on Wednesday evening generally. So
Okay, whenever it's convenient, but Sunday
Let
you're
me
booked
think.
for us.
I'm booked for Sunday. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for engaging me in the Lord's service.
Okay, let's go back to the question answer. Prabhuji.
Okay, the thing is that my connection fell out and therefore I've lost all the questions.
Okay, I'll read the questions out for you.
Yeah, if you could read the questions to me.
The person who said about surrender, how do I identify that we have not surrendered enough? Then he also makes a comment saying, agree. When I perform a devotional activity, I feel more energized. And one that I shouldn't be performing drains me.
Yes.
So
yes. Chapter, the devotional service is susukam, kartamavyayam. Susukam means very happily performed. Sukha means happiness, and susukam means very happy. So that is how we can identify something which is devotional service. Devotional service is by nature very joyful. So if we perform something which is draining us, either we're not performing it, if it's supposed to be devotional service, not performing it in good consciousness, or it's resentful or something like that, then that may be the case. But generally, devotional service by nature is very joyful. So that's how we can identify something which we should be doing in devotional service. Of course, another thing is to engage our natural propensity, whatever it is. Prabhupada even says that in Nectar of Devotion, that the spiritual master will try to engage a devotee using their natural qualities and propensities, because that way they make rapid advancement. But we should do that. We should try and identify what we like to do for Krishna, because that way make very rapid advancement. Is that
yes?
No.
Okay, there is another question. So why do we do things that we are not supposed to do? So
Arjuna asked the same question. He actually asked the same question. at the end of the third chapter, because the third chapter, Krishna talks so much about duty. You know, this is what you should be doing. This is your duty to set a good example. You have to work because you're forced by the modes of material nature. You have to work to maintain yourself. You must work as a sacrifice to Vishnu. Otherwise, work binds you in this material world. So Arjuna is hearing all these things, and he tells Krishna, why is it that, you know, we know what our duty is, but we go the other direction and we do what we're not supposed to do? So Krishna says it's lust only, Arjuna, which is born of contact with the material mode of passion and later transformed into wrath, which is the all-devouring sinful enemy of this world. It's because, and lust here is a very broad definition. Lust here means we want our sense gratification. That is why we do the wrong thing, because, you know, we want to engage the senses with their objects. We're maybe not getting the taste from our devotional service, and we're pleasure-seeking by nature. And therefore we go after, even though intellectually we know, actually, it's only going to satisfy me for some time, but we go after it because we lust for the material enjoyment. That is the problem, actually. So Krishna explains this very nicely. And if you want more, you can look at those verses in the end of the third chapter, 37 onwards to the end of the third chapter. Krishna explains it very nicely there. This lust is it burns like fire and it's never satisfied. And it's the all-devouring sinful enemy of this world. In that discussion, actually, Krishna explains how to identify what the nature of lust is, where it resides, and how to defeat it. Krishna explains all that. Regulation of the senses and deliberate spiritual intelligence. We need the knowledge which Krishna is giving in Bhagavad Gita so that we can identify, I'm about to engage the senses with their objects. I'm being influenced by lust here, the lust to enjoy the material nature. So that's we have to watch out for that, actually. We need to clearly think. We shouldn't just do things knee-jerk action. We should clearly think. We should be conscious. What am I doing here now? What's happening? Is it the mode of passion? Krishna's warning is born of the mode of passion, this lust, the desire to engage the senses with their objects. Is that all right?
Yes, Prabhuji. And does that mean that when we were with Krishna, we had developed that lust? And that's why we are here?
Actually, any thinking devotee will sooner or later ask this question. Anyone who comes into contact with devotional service is a thinking person will ask this question. How is it that we came here? How is that possible? What caused that, actually? So Prabhupada would give answers on two levels. The first level, he would say that it's a misuse of our independence. Krishna is fully independent, and we are part and parcel of Krishna, and therefore we have minute independence. So the misuse of that independence has brought us here. I want to see what's down there. That misuse of that independence has brought us to this place. So often devotees would push fast, but how is it that, you know, we would do that? Because we were with Krishna, and Krishna is the source of all ras. How could we be unhappy? How did that happen? So then Prabhupada would answer in the following way. He would say the reason for our fall from the spiritual world, the reasons for that are there in the spiritual world, but we're presently in the material world. So we can't fully understand that from this position. But when we go back to the spiritual world, we will understand how that happened. But basically, a simple answer to that question is, as Prabhupada would say, is that we have misused our independence. And what is that misuse? That misuse is, I think I can enjoy separate from Krishna. I don't need Krishna. I want to enjoy in my own way, in my own situation. And Krishna, like, fine, if you want that, there is a place I've generated where you can go and do that. But the problem is everybody else is doing that, and therefore there's competition. And it won't make you happy. But we want to try anyway. What's down there? Anyway, these are the two answers which Srila Prabhupada would give. Is that all right for the questioner?
Yes, Prabhuji, thank you. I'm saying yes because I know who the person is.
The questioner is, okay.
Okay, so this is now for the yoga ladder. We have understood now that there's Sankhya Yoga and the devotional work in devotional service.
Work in devotion, sure.
In self-realization. So does the Sankhya Yoga go into devotional service and then go into devotional service, or it's just two branches and then going into...
Prabhupada explains this very nicely in the purport to 647. 647 is the last verse of the 6th chapter, where Krishna says, of all the yogis, the one who constantly thinks of me within himself and is engaged in devotional service, he's the best. and the most intimately united me in yoga. In the purport to that verse, the last verse, this chapter, Prabhupada answers this very nicely. You see, just like, you know, if I do something for some length of time, I become attached to that and I want to do that thing, whatever it is, you know. Even sometimes we don't like something so much, but we do it so much, we get used to doing it and we get attached to it. So similarly, in the yogic processes that there are, the different stages of yoga progress, then one can become attached to that particular yoga process and get stuck like that. Because all yoga processes are supposed to bring one to devotional service, to bhakti yoga. That is why it's called a yoga ladder. The different rungs for different practitioners with different kinds of inclinations on different levels of spiritual realization. But actually, we all need to come to bhakti yoga. So all the other yoga systems are supposed to lead there. But the thing is often that yogic practitioners get trapped on a particular level. They get attached to a certain kind of thinking and a certain kind of consciousness, and they kind of get stuck there. But actually, all the processes of yoga depend on bhakti for success. Without bhakti, actually, there's really nothing. There has to be some element of pleasing Krishna. Otherwise, the yoga process won't really yield results. So they're all supposed to lead to bhakti yoga. But some of the processes are very, very difficult. Sankhya yoga, Jnana yoga is one of those processes, very, very difficult. So therefore, Krishna doesn't recommend it. He says, better you work, because that is what you're used to doing. So I don't know if that's all right for the questioner.
Yes, thank you, Prabhuji. I now understand it. So just to go back to further ask the question on the same on yoga ladder. So wouldn't the practitioners of Sankhya yoga feel that they are more egoistic and pompous, and they feel that, oh, these people are just doing devotional service. They don't know the shlokas and they can't recite the whole Gita, or they don't know the Vedas, and we know so much.
Yeah.
Would they be more egoistic and pompous and say, leave them? I mean, they know nothing. Would they be doing
These
such
people know nothing. Yeah, sure, that danger is. But certainly that danger is there, you know, the pompous attitude from knowing the Vedas is actually many of the practitioners of those Jnana yoga systems can run rings around us when it comes to quoting slokas and, you know, having a deep philosophical understanding, intellectual understanding of the Vedas. They can often leave the devotees in the dust, actually. So that is a danger. That is a danger of that yoga system. So therefore, we should take Krishna's advice, you know, that this is the Supreme Personality of Godhead who's telling us about these different Vedic processes. And he's saying, you know, that it's actually much easier to stay in your position and to work in devotion. It's actually much easier. We should take Krishna's advice because we don't want to get trapped in one of those other levels. Now, I work a little bit and, you know, I give some of the results of my activities to the Brahmins and this kind. And it's kind of comfortable for me. So I'm stuck in Sakama yoga. Or, you know, I've learned that this material world is not such a good place, and I've advanced through yoga practice, and I come now to the stage of Nishkam Karma yoga. But I want to do the things I want to do in the way I want to do them. So I get stuck in that yoga system. Or I get free from the material nature, get trapped in what's called the last snare of Maya. I think, oh, see, now I'm Brahman, I'm God, and I get stuck there. Or, you know, I learn to meditate and, you know, I get stuck in that practice. You know, okay, the super soul is there, but no, I like to actually just meditate on the super soul, and I don't really want to enter into actually a relationship and have an exchange, and I get stuck there. So the trick is not to get stuck in any of those yoga systems, but to recognize that they're supposed to bring everyone to this platform of devotional service, which is the only way that we can actually get liberation. Cannot get it through any other system. So this is why Krishna is giving all these in Bhagavad Gita, so that we can understand what's out there and we can understand properly that devotional service is the only process really worth practicing. Is that all right?
Yes, Prabhuji, thank you very much. And on the same note, so now we were talking of the pompous and the egoistic. Now on the devotional service, the practitioners are simple and they want to be as hollow as possible so that they don't have any anarthas. So they would probably live in a fear of being bullied because the Sankhya Yoga people would say that what you are doing is nothing compared to what we are doing. And
Yeah,
those
sure.
people are simple and they don't know the shlokas and everything. So would that not get their self-esteem low, or will they not? And they get asked so many questions and they can't quote and they don't know that how to answer those. So how do you strengthen the devotional service into not getting lower on their self-esteem?
So there's two ways of looking at this. You know, you see, one way of looking at this is let's look at the greatest devotees. Who are the greatest devotees? They're the gopis of Vrindavan. Do they know a lot of shlokas?
No.
No, they don't actually. So this is one way of looking at it, you know. But then also we can't be foolish. We need to develop that love for Krishna. That's the point. And it doesn't depend on things like scholarship. It doesn't depend on sacrifices. It doesn't depend on giving charity. It doesn't depend on any of those things actually. It is simply to learn to love Krishna. That's one way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it is that Prabhupada didn't want us to be fools. So Prabhupada therefore has given us what we need in order to defend our philosophy and support our practice of bhakti. So those books are Bhagavad Gita, Nectar of Devotion, Upadeshamrita, Shirshapannishad, Srimad Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita. So we shouldn't be, you know, we shouldn't go to the other extreme and say, well, you know, I don't need to know, I just need to learn to love Krishna. That the study of the books that Prabhupada has given us will give us support in our bhakti, and it will enable us to defend, you know, the devotional practices using scripture. So we shouldn't be fools either. We should learn the basic things which Prabhupada has given us, so that our own devotion is underpinned by knowledge, and also that we can convince others on the basis of knowledge, and we can defend our philosophy against all comers. So these are the two ways of looking at it. We need to develop love for Krishna, but also we shouldn't be foolish. You know, we should learn enough to support our own bhakti and also to defend it against all comers. Is that all right?
Yes, Prabhuji, thank you very much. It has clarified a lot of doubts. I'm sorry I've hogged up most of the questions because there were no other questions.
But there
on
is
the
one
chat.
typed here. I see that somebody's typed a question.
Are there any other questions?
Yeah, there's one typed here. Prabhu, if I understand well, then there is a difference between offering a veggie burger to Krishna and offering him what he actually wants. But then again, is it okay to still offer this veggie burger and gradually we come to offer the Lord what he wants? Yes, you've answered your own question. You see, it's true that when we come to a very advanced stage, we don't think about what we want. We only think about what Krishna wants. But that is an advanced platform. Now, you know, we need to be realistic about where we're at. And at least we should come to the platform where we say, you know, okay, there's this injunction that I shouldn't take meat, fish, or eggs, but what's the positive injunction? And the positive injunction is that you should only eat things which are offered to Krishna. So, you know, it's not that we can say, well, no, I'm just going to cook the things that Krishna likes. Sometimes, you know, we have to satisfy ourselves in a way which is as devotional as we can make it. So that's realistic and it's practical. So yes, offer your veggie burger to Krishna because it's practical and it's real. And Krishna understands that. And then at least we're taking something which has been offered to Krishna and it'll purify us. But when we're ready, then we can come to the stage where we only cook what Krishna wants. But it's stepwise. We go little by little by little. The thing is to understand where we are now and to understand the steps that we need to take to go forward and then approach that in a realistic way that is step by step that we can actually handle, not to try to do more than our position actually allows. I hope that's all right. Prahlad, is that okay?
Well, that was not my question. It was someone else's.
It says from Prahlad to everyone. Oh,
so
someone.
That's the next question.
All right.
Prahlad to everyone, which is probably.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm in the kitchen, so there's a lot of noise.
Okay, now this was from Stephanie, actually, this question. Stephanie, is that all right? She's on the chat, but she's not answering. Stephanie, is it okay?
Yes, it is, Prabhu. Thank you very
Okay.
much.
Okay, you're welcome. Prahlad, I'm now seeing your question. Prabhuji, when you had talked about our independence being the reason on why we're here, does that mean that someone who's already gone back to Godhead can come back to the material platform? Yes, you see, Krishna, in Bhagavad Gita especially, Krishna himself mentions in many places that once you go to that spiritual world, you won't return. And we can understand it in the following way, because this, the analogy which is given in Srimad Bhagavatam and other places is that this material world is like a dream existence. It's a dream-like existence. So actually, when we come to realize what this material world, it's like a bad dream. So if you wake, you know, if we're living our lives material and we wake from sleep and we've had a bad dream, will you want to go back to that dream the next evening? No, when we had a bad dream, we don't want to have that dream again, actually. We think, oh, no, thank you very much. So when we enter back into the spiritual world, there's like a bad dream that we had. So having had that experience, you wouldn't want that experience again. So this is another way of looking at it. Krishna himself asserts that once having gone there, you never return. And we can also look at it intellectually, that if you've had that bad experience in the material world, would you really want to return? So these are two ways of looking at that question. Is that all right, Prahlad?
Yes, Prabhuji.
And then we have a thank you from Stephanie. So we completed the questions on the chat. So if nobody has anything else, then we should hand back to Kirtika.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, thank you very much. A lot of questions and doubts have been cleared. And so you know now, Prabhuji, how we really need your association. So please, Sunday is definite, but if you can have some more time, we'd appreciate that as well. I'd now hand over to Path Prabhuji. Path Prabhuji, let's do the closing ceremony. Hare Krishna, Path Prabhuji. I think Path Prabhuji might be a little occupied because it is Sunday evening and he's at the temple. So let me, on behalf of everybody from this group from all over the world, we had Dr. Vishal Agrawal from Manchester, we had Hansa Patel from London and everywhere else. We'd like to offer our humble obeisances and thank you very much, Prabhuji, for enlightening us today. Let us all chant Hare Krishna Maha Mantra to glorify Prabhuji. So everybody unmute kindly so Prabhuji can at least hear all of us and chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. Hare Krishna, Hare
Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Shri Shyamanand Krishna Das Prabhuji ki Jai. Prabhupada ki Jai.
पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः.
Hare Krishna all. Thank you for joining.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
Jai.